What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be doing a book review of Pines by Blake Crouch. Now, before we jump into the review, let's go over what is this book about. One way in, no way out. Secret Service agent Ethan Burke arrives in Wayward Pines, Idaho with a mission: locate two federal agents who went missing in the bucolic town 1 month earlier. But within minutes of his arrival, Ethan is involved in a violent accident. He comes to in a hospital with no ID, no cell phone, and no briefcase. As the days pass, Ethan's investigation turns up more questions than answers. Why can't he get any phone calls through to his wife and son in the outside world? Why doesn't anyone believe he is who he says he is? And what is the purpose of the electrified fences surrounding the town? Are they meant to keep the residents in, or something else out? Each step closer to the truth takes Ethan farther from the world he knew, from the man he was, until he must face a horrifying fact that he may never get out of Wayward Pines alive. Alright guys, if you're new to the channel, the way that I normally structure my reviews is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the things about the book that I enjoyed, the bad being the things I didn't enjoy so much, and these are preferential things like character narrative, or prose, those kinds of things. And then I go over the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from reading it. So let's jump into the good. What were some things about this book that I enjoyed? Almost everything. This book was awesome. It was like reading an M. Night Shyamalan movie, but one of the good ones. Which is kind of funny because apparently M. Night Shyamalan directed and wrote the script for the Wayward Pines TV series, which I think aired on Fox several years ago. This book, it's got a lot of suspense in it. It's got a lot of thriller mystery aspects, but then it has this sort of undercurrent of horror steeped into the entire plot. And so we're following Ethan, who wakes up, has no idea who he is, has no ID.
Who is she?
No ID.
No ID!
No idea?
No ID!
No idea.
No ID!
No idea?
No ID!
No idea.
No! Here.
No idea?
No ID! No ID!
No idea? Check her identification.
Has no ability to reach out to anybody that he knows and loves. He's stuck in this little town. He can't figure out what's going on, but he knows that something is off. There's something wrong with the town, and not just the town, but with the people that live in the town. So he's trying to figure out and trying to navigate not only his investigation that he's supposed to be conducting, but also how he's going to get back home. And as the story unfolds, he realizes very quickly that there's a lot more going on and a lot more wrong with this world than what he first believed. So the good, man, I really loved the plot more than anything. The setting was pretty cool. You are confined to the one town for the most part. There's a couple of flashbacks where we see Ethan is leading up into Wayward Pines, or we see some flashback interactions with different people. But for the most part, you are in Wayward Pines. And so Crouch does an excellent job of describing this little town and making you feel like that it's really lived in. But he also does an excellent job of making you feel like there's just something off about the town. So that is really, really cool. The setting and the plot definitely takes center stage here. And then our character is sort of our piece in the board game that's moving around to keep the story moving. And that tends to be the case with Blake Crouch's books. He definitely leans more into the plot and the concept of his novels more so than he does with his individual characters. Now, does that mean that he doesn't care about his characters or that his characters are bad? Absolutely not. His characters, for the most part, are pretty good, but a lot of times they can seem kind of like cookie cutter. And with Ethan, we do get that quite a bit. You hear Secret Service agent, you kind of know what you're going to get there. There's not really a lot of nuance to Ethan's character. There is some, and that definitely plays a big role into the plot. But for the most part, he's your pretty average main character, pretty average investigator. If you've seen the TV series, Matt Dillon plays the main character, Ethan Burke, and that's who I pictured. And even if you haven't seen the TV series, you picture something like that. Not to just stereotype him, but that's sort of how he's described. As Matt Dillon, most of his characters are that kind of role. And so I definitely enjoyed having a face to my character. He doesn't dwell too much on the character nuance, but instead leans heavy into the concept. And man, is the concept of this book really, really interesting. So what did I like about this book? The concept, the actual plot, the story of him trying to investigate his missing agents, but then on top of that, he's kind of thrust into this other investigation that's the real, it's why these agents went missing, and he's having to navigate and solve this other thing. Is really, really interesting. Also, the things that I like about Blake Crouch's books is that he tends to think of all of the little questions you may ask as the reader. So you may have questions about, okay, well, how does this work? How does that work? And he has an answer for it in here. And it's a lot more show than it is tell. Blake Crouch is a great writer. There's a reason why he's sold millions of copies of books. It's because he's a great writer and he's able to do this. He's able to show you what's going on rather than just give you a list of information and say, here's information and now let's move forward with the story. And so I do really, really, really enjoy that because he does an excellent job of that. Now, this is the fourth Blake Crouch book that I've read, and this is supposed to be one of his better ones, and I happen to agree. I thought it was fantastic. So let's go into the bad. What were some things about this book that I didn't like so much? There were a few things. There were some things that I could see that he was using in book one to set up book two. There was a female character that was briefly mentioned in book one that really wasn't mentioned at all, or didn't really pertain to the story much at all throughout book one, because you could tell that's where book two was going. And if I'm being frank,
Hey, Frank.
it wasn't really something that I cared about. That may be one, is that this did seem a little bit like a setup book, which I get that it's a trilogy, but I think he could have written it, me being just a guy with the internet, sitting here trying to criticize a best-selling author, but I think he could have written it in such a way where we would have had a more tight story without him having to set all that kind of stuff up for the future books and without losing anything. So other than that, I didn't really find anything in here that I thought was like bad. I mean, if you want me to be nitpicky, there are a couple of typos in here that pulled me out of the story for a minute that just kind of threw me for a loop. But other than that, I didn't really see anything in here that I would label as bad or things that I didn't prefer. And so this leads me into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into the work that might hold a Christian back from reading it. And I break this down into 5 categories, starting with violence and brutality. Now, violence and brutality, I gave this an 8. It's pretty brutal. For the most part, this book is non-violent. There's a lot of tension going on in the background. So for the most part, this book isn't violent. It's not brutal, but when it is, it really is. There's just some things that Ethan stumbles upon that are really brutal in nature. And then there's some things that he is thrown into that are very violent in nature. And so I had to give this an 8 because at its most extreme, it's definitely an 8. But for the most part, the book tends to sit around a 2 or a 3. Maybe not with violence, but it's just that constant tension where something's about to happen. And it does. So violence and brutality, I'm going to give an 8 because there's definitely some squeamish bits in here. So this leads me into sexually explicit content. Now I gave this a 4. The reason I gave this a 4 is because in this town, they are under constant surveillance. And so because of that, there is nothing behind closed doors that isn't seen. Now, in this book, there isn't a lot that is explicitly expressed, but I will say that it is alluded to. Also, there's talk of a couple of marital affairs here that play into it. Again, it doesn't go into descriptors, but there is sort of this constant thought in the back of your mind about, okay, so does that mean? And Blake Crouch kind of tells you, yeah, it does mean that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So I wouldn't say it's really explicit, but there are allusions to sexually explicit content that you need to be aware of. Now, do I think it was necessary for the story? I mean, no, but I understand why he did it, because that was a question that you would have in the back of your mind. It's, okay, well, if they're under constant surveillance, does that mean constant surveillance? And the answer is yes, it does mean that. So just know that going into it. Now, this leads me into category 3, which is language. Now, language, I gave a 7.5. So 7.5 because it's not quite an 8, but it's also not, it's a little past the 7. So what I mean by this is that there's some language in here that is really, really, really heavy at times. Emotions are high. They're super high at times. And so because of that, some of these expletives are brought forth from numerous characters. So just know that going into it. The language, I would say this. I wouldn't listen to this on an audiobook over a loudspeaker in my home with my children. So that I wouldn't personally. I think you're going to have to be your own judge here. I would say that there are parts that definitely lean more towards an 8 as far as how heavy the language is. But for the most part, there's not really a lot. There's some. But when those really high tension moments hit, yeah, that's when they start to come out. And I wouldn't say they're overly scarce. Blake Crouch is not afraid to throw in some of the heavier language. So just know that going into it. Now, this leads me into gratuitous inclusions. Now, what I mean by gratuitous inclusions is there gratuitous inclusion and diversity for the sake of inclusion and diversity in these books? And the answer is no, I didn't see anything. So I gave it a 0. I didn't see anything personally in this book. So I would say no, and maybe don't worry about it. It's not, there's nothing like that in here. There's nothing that is explicitly mentioned. I don't even think there's a nod to it anywhere. So Blake Crouch was just out to write a good, compelling story. And I think he did a good job. And so this leads me into the last category, which is dark themes. Now, dark themes, again, this is one where I also kind of throw in heavy themes here, and I'm going to say this is a 7. There are some really heavy topics mentioned in this book. There's also some more bleak things mentioned in this book, things like hopelessness. And this book in particular is not really one that has that ray of hope that is shining through all of it. It is more of Ethan is trying to find that ray of hope in this really dark, bleak world. So know that going into it. This isn't a story like a feel-good story where you're going to go away from it and just, feeling uplifted and edified. It's not that. Like I said, you're going to go away from this book similar to how you went away with watching The Village by M. Night Shyamalan. I mean, it's kind of creepy. It's really creepy. It's kind of hopeless. Makes you feel kind of bad about what some of the things our characters are going through. But you do see where the trajectory can be one of hope. But for the most part, it's not really in here. On top of that, you're dealing with things like murder, you're dealing with kidnapping and those kinds of things. So just know that going into it, which is why I gave Dark Themes a 7. And so this leads me to, would I recommend this to a Christian? And the answer is no, I would not. Now, some of you that have watched my videos know, like, I can't believe you actually just said no, because most of the time I say probably not, or maybe. I'm normally somewhere in the middle, but I'm going to say no here. And here's the reason why. I loved book 1. I absolutely loved book 1. I think I read it basically in a 24-hour period.
Nobody cares.
So good. It's a fantastic book. But I started book 2 and I had to put it down. And that one hurt a little bit. So I started book 2 and it got very sexually explicit. I mean, it was literary pornography. That's why I cannot recommend this to a Christian. I had to put it down. It it really weighed on my conscience just even reading the few words about what was taking place that I had read. And this is not something where I'm just going to skip over it. I know some people can do that, and if you can, that's great. If you get to one of those more spicy scenes and you're just like, I can just skip this and go the next thing, then, you know, use your own judgment there. But for me, I can't. If I'm having to skip chapters or skip pages and things like that, it's going to be difficult for me to be able to promote your work. And so for me, I think it's just better to err on the side of caution and just go ahead and step away from it. So I would say no. I would not recommend this to a Christian. I'm not saying that if you've read this book and that you liked it, that makes you somehow less. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm just giving you my experience from reading this book. Is it was one of regret. I loved book 1, but because of book 2, yeah, I think it would be wise for us to maybe just steer clear of this trilogy and maybe reach for one of Blake Crouch's other books like Dark Matter or Recursion. Those two are fantastic. But again, just know that going into it, that it just got too explicit, and so I had to step away from it. And honestly, Blake Crouch tends to lean into the more sexually explicit content into his books. Now, I am not trying to get Blake Crouch to write a book for a Christian to read. That's not what I'm doing at all. I don't expect him to do anything less than what he did. And that's not me being ugly, but if Blake Crouch is not a born-again believer, then I can't expect him to write books that would be appeasing to those that are. So he's going to do what he knows works for him, and also maybe what he's interested in. And so it's not my place to try to dictate what he does or doesn't put into his books, but it is up to me whether or not I pick his books up. And so I would just say it's probably best if you steer clear of it. Now, could you read book 1 and go away satisfied? I think so. I think you could read book 1 and go and look up like a synopsis of the next 2 books, and you would probably be fine. I kind of wish I would have stopped at book 1. Now, I will also say that if you've seen the series, if you've watched the Wayward Pines show, at least the first season, this book is going to be spoiled for you pretty heavily. It was for me. I still really enjoyed it. So just keep that in mind. I don't know the types of things that are in the series. I don't remember. It's been years, but I did remember the end of season 1. And so the end of the book was a little spoiled for me. So if you're trying to avoid spoilers and you do plan on reading this book, I would say don't watch the show first. Make sure you read the book first and then go back and watch the show. And there is quite a few differences there, but for the most part, how M. Night Shyamalan wrote the script for this adaptation, I think he did a pretty good job of hitting the nail on the head there. So would I recommend this to a Christian? Probably not. But if you think, hey, I can read book 1 and step away, yeah. If that's your kind of thing, if you like the M. Night Shyamalan kind of horror thriller mystery type movie, I think you'll like this because it's kind of like that in book form. But for most of us, I would say you probably find something else that you'll enjoy more. But if you guys have read this and you enjoyed it, let me know down in the comment section below. If you guys didn't, or if you guys have any questions about this book and maybe you're on the fence of whether or not you should read it, just leave a comment down below and I absolutely will answer it. Now, it might not be the best answer because it's coming from me, but I will do my best to give you an answer. So other than that, guys, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me and listening to me ramble about this book for a little bit. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.